Okay, hello and welcome everyone listening to this and watching this. We've got Paul Hewitt, Chairman and CEO of Karora Resources with us, an Australian gold producer. Chris Jordan just joined us. He's President and CEO of Superior Gold. Hello, Chris. And both in Perth. And we've got Anil Warach, Executive VP, Steppe Gold, all the way from Toronto. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Good day.
Matt. So you two are at 10 p.m. and you're like 8 or 9 a.m.
Yeah.
Wow. Technology. We cracked it, guys. I'm looking forward to this session.
What's your time zone?
We are only 2 in the afternoon. It's fine. It's nearly drinking.
Isn't that interesting how the moderator gets a perfect time zone? That's an interesting concept. Yeah.
I know. I'm not as dumb as I look. Right, okay, gentlemen. For the adoring crowd, you're all gold producers, so that's the commonality here. You've all come off the back towards the end of the year 2021, which was meant to be a good year for precious metals. The kind of slight disconnect between equities price, in terms of what you guys are seeing, and also gold price. And a little bit of residue from the euphoria of 2020. So what I want to talk about today, if you guys are fine with this, is lessons learned, okay? Because I think we've got 2 turnaround stories in the house, and we've also got a company operating in a jurisdiction which not a lot of people know about. So if you're okay with that, I'm just going to go for it, as it were. So the Aussies in the house, competition for resources, employee services, and all the restrictions. How have you found it this year, and what have you learned? Do you want to kick off, Paul?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt, and welcome everyone to this panel. I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it. When we think about 2021, interesting year with orders up here in WA. Certainly had our fair challenges acquiring and getting the right people. In our case, we've been pretty fortunate with our labor force. We've attracted and retained the right people. It wasn't that far back when I was interviewing with you, Matt, and talking 2 or 3 years ago when I first took over, and our turnover rate here pre-COVID was 87%, if you'll recall. In early discussions you and I had, turnover rate was 87%. So we're sitting here with our labor turnover rate here sitting right about average, about 19%. And this is during COVID. The challenges we're facing here, all of us here in Western Australia, is getting the right people. And again, those closures on the borders have proved to be really challenging. And there's some big upcoming projects coming up that BHP is putting forward in the next couple of years. It's just going to make that even more challenging for us. So we're going to have to be on our best game, attracting and retaining the best people. And look, you pointed out commodities. Things have been going up. We're not exempt from the rise in pricing on commodities. There's certainly, you could pick and choose one or the other. We're in the middle of our budget process now. Depending on which commodity we choose, we've seen increases from 3% all the way to north of 10% on some of the commodities this year, and transportation's been very high. Well, look, I don't want to send a false message either where I alarm people and go, well, my gosh, there's going to be this big burst or anything. We've been really successful in managing some of these commodity increases for ourselves and for our shareholders. We've really focused on productivity rates here. For example, that turnover rate, that's a big one. We've also taken that main infrastructure at Beta Hunt. That ramp used to be 37 to 40,000 tons a month out of that ramp. That was about the best we can get out of that ramp, that decline. Today, we're sitting comfortably at about 80,000 tons per month. So same amount of truck drivers, same amount of trucks, larger trucks, Matt, better scheduling, better planning, better team, and a stronger execution. We've had 9 quarters in a row here where we've executed consistently. So we're not exempt from any of the rising costs, but we're putting a lot of steps in place to make sure that we continue to successfully deliver that $1,000 an ounce at an all-in sustaining cost. And the last quarter, we were sitting about 967 in Q3. And we've got a huge differentiator. Look, I've been in mining 34 years now, predominantly all gold in Canada, the US, Australia. I've had some time in South Africa. It's very rare that you get an operation like ours that has that nickel as a byproduct credit. So we're pretty fortunate that we have that nickel. We've been mining remnant areas so far. We've had 2 new discoveries with the 30C and the 50C. These nickel zones do help us tremendously at managing our costs and keeping that $1,000. So as we're preparing our budget looking into 2022, we're certainly aware of making sure that we attract and retain the right people, and we are bringing in a strong workforce, training up our own people, and then managing those costs. You know, one of our big initiatives 2 years ago was renegotiating contracts with our top 20 vendors. And that's had a long lasting effect for us, even to this day, 2 years after we've negotiated that. So, I guess we're not exempt from it. We need to make sure we continue to manage it and strive for that $1,000 an ounce all-in sustaining costs, which is a huge target for ourselves.
Huge target, one you've, I think you've done already, according to Oliver. So all good news. Chris, now you're in the middle of a turnaround story too. It must be hugely frustrating for you, for all of these inflationary factors to be, out of your control, but they're there whilst you're trying to drive efficiencies in the company. I mean, I know you're relatively new joiner to this, so, but if you don't mind, what are your thoughts on what Superior's been able to achieve in 2021?
Yeah, so I don't think the story is much different to what Paul explained there. We probably, I think, a little bit behind on the bus insofar as our turnaround story. We're still very early into it, so looking forward to improved performance going forward. But I think from a resources perspective, specifically given our size, we had to rethink the way that we procure resources to get certain things done in our operations as well as in our Perth office. So the first thing we did was to think differently about the ecosystem within which we operate and drafting the people that, with the right skill set to work on it. I think COVID has helped us a long way in making us recognize that we can work differently, and it's about, pushing that to the limit. In our case, for instance, there was a project on which we worked 24 hours around the clock. We had a team here in Perth. We had a team in the US and a team in South Africa working on the same project. So there's different ways and means to skin the cat, specifically when it comes to technically complex pieces of work that we do. But at the end of the day, you still need your operators, and I think the big thing for us is about reconsidering the employee value proposition that we put forward. And it's not only in salary. It's having conversations, having regular engagements. It's understanding what the challenges are of the people that work for us and that's helping us along this journey. One should never underestimate that you're dealing with a 24-hour person. So there's a lot of challenges that people face at home from a COVID perspective. People have lost family members. So it's really reaching out way and beyond just the normal duty of work to really engage with people into their lives and make them part of the journey going forward. I think the other thing that's also critical, and it kind of touches on what Paul said, is around what we can do around efficiencies. And the key for us there is utilizing technology to the best of our benefit. And it's not only communications technology, but also the way that we consider our ore bodies and see whether we could access the ore more accurately, more cost efficiently, and also recognizing that specifically in our case, where a lot of our kit is quite old, and we started with the recapitalization process. It's just absolutely amazing once you recognize how much more productive these new pieces of kit are, and you have to progress with that, taking that forward. I think the challenge for us from a resources perspective is more around supply of specific pieces of kit. I think the general supply chain is relatively stable, and it's quite well maintained. But when you start, buying specific pieces of kit, specifically around mobile equipment. Delivery is certainly a little bit longer. So, planning is super critical and making sure that you coincide your plan with availability of these pieces of kit. So I think that in general, our approach that we followed on that basis, it's certainly not to the extent impacting that we initially anticipated it would on our turnaround story. To a large extent, our cost benefits are going to come through volume. So it's just making sure we get more out of the ground, more through the mill. And given the fact that we long on mill capacity, which is quite unique, the opportunity for further improvement and fixed cost dilution is significant. And that's our key driver at this stage.
Okay, brilliant. Lots of great points there. And I also want to come back to the kind of just-in-time component of managing an operation. But better get Anil and warmed up. Anil, is Mongolia exempt from the effects of COVID, positively, negatively?
Negatively. We're obviously impacted like everyone else, but I think even more so, given we rely on our neighbors for all equipment, supplies. So workforce, very fortunately, when we set up the company, we always wanted to be a Mongolian company listed here on the TSX. So 99% of our workforce are Mongolian. So in April 2020, when COVID obviously was very early stage, but very scary, Mongolia was closed off completely. So any expat on our team could never even get in the country if they tried for about 8 months, 10 months. So we had the confidence in our local team, skilled local team, to bring production online for the first time ever. So startup and ramp up started in April 2020 in a very tough time, where we still managed to get our key supplies over the border because the government was a partner of ours. They invested in Steppe Gold. So they certainly helped achieve that key milestone during April 2020. Roll around a year later, COVID has actually gotten worse in Mongolia. So in 2020, they actually closed out the country and were proactive. Preemptively, in January 2020, they closed off the borders with Russia and China. There was no flights going in and out. They had lockdown in country, closed all the schools. So there's no domestic cases. Later in the year, they started getting domestic cases, and now they're at record case numbers today. For a small population of 3.5 million people, seeing 3,000 to 4,000 cases a day domestically has had a big impact, not only on our team, but from traveling, roster changes from one province to another, and then quarantine before they come on site. So we adapted to all that. So we've continued to operate through this, but it certainly has slowed things down. And our biggest impact, which many people know, is that we've now essentially lost 2 quarters of production because we haven't received our key chemicals to produce. So we've managed to build a stockpile, continue to mine, crush, stack, and we've already shown the market that we can produce without any issues because it's high-grade oxide. It recovers well. It recovers very quickly. But we're seeing that impact in terms of COVID with the borders now. So China decides what comes across the border. So we've gotten key equipment for our second phase crusher, but we haven't received a cyanide shipment or key reagents for over 6 months. So certainly an impact there. And what we've learned obviously from that is to not single source from one single country or a single supplier. And I think that's very important to have that diversification so that you can at least try to diversify this risk. Now, saying that, we have looked at all the other countries in the last 6 to 9 months, and none of them have moved forward either to be able to bring supply in. That'll change, and it could change this weekend, but certainly that's the main impact, I guess. The health and safety of our team, which we managed to keep everyone very healthy on site, getting to site and leaving properly with the right protocols in place. So the daily testing and the quarantine that we put in place, in addition to what the provinces and the federal government required. So long story short, COVID has certainly had a big impact in Mongolia, given the size and of being a landlocked country between Russia and China.
Yeah, thanks for the update. And I mean, I think you arranged a fantastic series of calls for us with some of the Mongolian government representatives. They are open for business. I was just intrigued to see what it's actually like on the ground. Paul, you mentioned a few of the moving parts, a few of the variables there in terms of the things that you're looking at to help reduce your costs, get your AISC down, etc. We've had, and I want to talk about the kind of just-in-time versus your backup inventory style of OPEX management, because we've had companies come on here and say, we've been using filters for 300-400% longer than we should because we just can't get things in country. Australia, big mining jurisdiction. Surely you don't have those problems, do you?
Yeah, sorry, Matt. The question is, we're not having problems with getting filters and stuff for our equipment?
Just doing equipment, OpEx equipment in country. Are there any delays? Are there any significant meaningful costs?
Yeah, look, we certainly do have some delays on some things with respect to operating. We're actually right now struggling with line, to be honest. Look, having the benefit of a very strong balance sheet has been able to help us in many situations here. Even last year, or when we were dealing with the bushfires, when we were dealing with the floods, when we had all kinds of other natural disasters when I first started here, having a strong balance sheet allows us to stock up more. We do carry much more in our warehouse here and in inventory, more than what I'm used to seeing. In fact, I would say that our warehouse is probably almost double the size of what it should be to be completely efficient. And that's to protect ourselves from parts or delays, an engine on a 6-yard or something, or a tire on a 60-ton truck, making sure that that truck isn't down for a week because we're missing a tire. And look, I've been part of operations in my career that I've run myself that have had these challenges where exactly that. You're missing a tire and the 6-yard is parked up for a week, or a drop box on a 6-yard. So the benefit of having a stronger balance sheet has helped us to prevent and mitigate that to an extent. What I was pointing to earlier, renegotiating those contracts was really important. And Anil said something that's really important to us as well, where he was talking about diversity. We don't have one vendor for everything we do. We have a list, and in our risk register, we'll have a supplier for cyanide, a supplier for any component, anything for scoops, and we're going to have 2 other suppliers behind that, understanding where we can get those commodities, components. We have a fallback plan. We do have risk mitigation that we place should we not get the part on time, to make sure that one of our biggest challenges is if we fall behind on production because we missed rounds or something, it's hard to make that up for us during the year. At least it's been hard in my career to try to make it up. You can't, if you're down for 2 weeks at the plant, it's hard to say, well, I'm going to make that up down the road. You got greater tons to push it through. So we're not exempt from it, Matt. We've been putting together again we've got a very senior person in charge of all our contracts now, negotiating stuff on a daily basis, making sure we're speaking to vendors more often than you'd normally speak to them, especially on the critical ones, on things that we need to make sure the mill runs and our beta hunt runs. There are 2 key components for us, are making sure beta hunt's always running and the mill is always running. So we've got a list of things that we look at, critical spares, and we make sure that we have those in the warehouse, or we know where they're sitting on a shelf in Kalgoorlie or somewhere else that we can say, look, it might not be sitting in our warehouse, but we've sourced it and we know it's sitting there. And should we need it, we can pick up the phone and we know we can get it. Some of the issues have been getting stuff into the country, into Western Australia. So that's been a bit of a challenge for us as well. So
the reason I'm asking these questions, Paul, is because when you got, especially you two, where your turnaround stories, it's about reducing cost, increasing production, hopefully a nice big healthy delta between the two. These small things can have huge knock-on effects, and then the cost of money has a knock-on effect for you guys. Chris, if I talk to you about supply chains, to put it in day-to-day parlance for us retail family office investors, it's like when hand sanitizer costs went from 50 cents to $5 because there's a shortage. You guys are bearing the brunt of that now. When do you think the cost will normalize again, and do they go down?
Yeah, well, I've rarely seen costs come down because prices up. So I think the whole industry is resetting itself on a different level, given the challenges throughout the value chain. I mean, if you, although this this doesn't affect us on our major equipment, but on LVs, for instance, there is a short supply on LVs. We typically use Toyota. There's specific pieces of equipment. I know some of the Toyota factories closed for a month or two during this period because they don't get specific electronic equipment to get these vehicles out. So once again, our approach is very similar. We've got a critical list of equipment and spares that we make sure that we have available. But I think in addition to that, we've certainly also upped the ante on our predictive maintenance to better understand and trying to forecast what potential failures we might see in specific pieces of kit, and making sure we have those spares available, or at least, in the supply chain available for us to grab onto it. But we've been very blessed up to now, whereby we haven't had any major impact from that perspective. I think probably the biggest impact we have had was whereby we had to postpone a shutdown for a week or two, just to be to do it at a time when specific individuals with the technical skill were available. But so far so good. But just going back to your question on cost, I think to a large extent the only real cost benefit is not going to come from price, but demand management, and making sure that you utilize or manage demand appropriately and trying to reduce that. But in addition to that, also, sharp negotiation and putting those contracts in place, which makes sense. In our case, for instance, we've got a very long tail of suppliers, which I think to some extent is helping us now because we have options. But certainly in a stable state, one would want to reduce that and stick to specific suppliers over the longer term.
So Neil, for you, listening to what I just heard, if you're getting supplies in from China, are you constrained in terms of where you can go for your equipment, given where it's got to come over the border?
There is some constraints. We have the advantage that Chinese border is 150 kilometers east of us. It's low transportation costs, low cost of equipment, and you can still source quality equipment from multiple suppliers. So that's the difference here, I guess, is having multiple suppliers but still come from China. If the border's backed up or the government's closing off the borders, we can't, no matter how many suppliers we have coming from one country, we can't change that. So we have looked from Russia. We have looked from Kazakhstan. We have actually sourced equipment from Russia for our boiler house for heating up in the winter and whatnot. So, and we have received other critical equipment from the Chinese border, but there is some reliance. Now, as a protection measure, we also have about seven producing mines that are Chinese owned by either SOEs or larger entities, and the Chinese government relies on those concentrates so they need that feed. So eventually, we're going to have the benefit of the bigger companies that are shipping over, including OT, obviously, that is obviously shipping all their concentrates over to China. So we'll get to ride the bigger guys' coattails, I guess, when it comes down to that in the future. But certainly, it's a risk that clearly exists today. But something that we'll be able to deal with. We think so.
And Anil, so I want to stick with you just briefly, because you guys raised some money on the Mongolian exchange.
We haven't raised on the Mongolian exchange yet. We were going to raise money in Mongolia from the
Mongolia, right? Okay. So are you finding more and more interest, or are they excluding you because you're a foreign entity? I mean, how's it work there in terms of ingratiating yourself locally?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I think we're considered, like I mentioned earlier on, is a Mongolian company. Our CEO is Mongolian, half our board are Mongolian, and as I mentioned, 99% of our staff. So the reason we did an IPO in 2018, the only IPO on the main board of the TSX in a very tough market, to not even raise enough capital, to be honest, we like to be overcapitalized, was to put a spotlight on Mongolia to show you can do business, you can build with the government support. And so just under 2 years ago, the Sovereign Fund of Mongolia made their first ever investment in any mining company was into Steppe Gold. So certainly that shows you we're doing things properly and there's interest there. So on our register today, we have about 15% Mongolian investors, including our CEO. We now received a $65 million US package for our phase 2 expansion 2 weeks after announcing the feasibility study, all from within Mongolia, sponsored by the Bank of Mongolia, 60 million of that. So clearly there is support. So the Mongolian listing was another way which we haven't completed as yet. That'll probably more like happen in the next 3 to 6 months when production is back online. it's better to list as a producer. If you say you're a producer, you should be in production. So, which is not a big deal for us. It's only a few months away, right? And we've already shown that. But that listing will allow the locals to be able to buy shares more easily, right? Today, it's very hard for them to buy on the TSX, and so that wasn't a capital raise listing. It's more of the listing to increase our retail investor base, and there's a lot of interest as people see the good we're doing in country and how we're actually highlighting the country in a way, even though we're not a big project like an OT or a big company like them as yet, our aspirations are to become one. We're de-risking the profile, we think, of Mongolia by educating people and showing people, show us the risks. What risks have we encountered besides COVID, I guess, in the last 4 or 5 years since we started the company?
No, I'm a convert for sure, and I don't know if anyone else on the panel's worked in Mongolia, but from what I'm hearing and seeing close up, it is open for business. Just sticking with the theme of cost of money. Now, Paul, you've been building up a big treasure trove of cash from the production that you've been seeing over the last 18 months or so, 2 years actually. So maybe you don't care as much about the next question as you should, because there's a certain zero carbon initiative, there's green initiatives, there's the ESG initiative, and it's all pointing towards the ability to get cheaper and cheaper money. Well, compared to the regular conventional financing. I mean, one, I don't know if you agree with that, and two, do you think you'd ever need to dip into that resource?
Yeah, so look, just before I get there, I just wanted to end on your other cost things about inflation. Mm-hmm. The one advantage we have as gold companies is typically as inflation increases, gold prices typically increase. So we have that advantage as gold miners that when inflation is rising, Matt, gold prices typically rise, as we've seen historically. So that's certainly an advantage, and most of us are budgeting with lower metal prices. So that was just a comment on the end
Sure.
of what we were talking about, costs and managing them. With respect to ESG and where it's going and reduction on costs, I think it matters if you have 90 in cash or 5 million in cash. Cheap shareholders, and we should all be looking that way. And then look, earlier this year, it was over a video call. Me and the CFO met with one of the large 4 banks in Canada, actually. We're going to be restructuring our debt that we have in place. And there's no doubt the future is, even at this present time, there are opportunities for your sustainability scorecard to impact the percent you're going to pay in debt. Your weighted average cost capital will change, actually. In fact, we in the term sheet that we got in the preliminary numbers, we saw about 5 basis points, actually. So 0.05%. So rather than paying 6%, you might pay 5.5%. So you're seeing it already. Look, in our case, for our own needs this year, it wasn't that meaningful, but it is certainly changing, and it's changing quickly with ESG and net zero. So I suspect in the next year or so, even in a lot of the marketing I'm doing, I'm getting a lot of feedback from the institutions that you better make sure your sustainability scorecard's really good, Mr. Hewitt, because it's going to impact how we invest equity. But even on that debt component, as you were pointing out, there's no doubt that it's here to stay, and a good scorecard will certainly help you. And look, I'm going to take this moment to talk about our net zero initiative. We've put out a big initiative this year as a junior gold company. We're net neutral in 2021. I have some of my people kind of chuckling at me because I said I've taken a massive ESG training for executives and directors, and we've also engaged net zero out of Toronto. So 3 years ago, I wasn't even talking about ESG or net zero as CEO and president of another company. Now it's everything I'm talking about, every investor I talk about, it's very important. I actually took the challenge personally, and I don't know if you know this, Matt, but I actually bought myself a bike, and I ride to work each day, 21 kilometers, and every 100 kilometers I ride, it's 23 kilograms of carbon dioxide offset in the world. And it might not mean a lot, but every little bit helps. And I took the challenge personally after all the training I've done. I was surprised that even not driving to work, that 21 kilometers, per day could have such a big impact. And look, directly from the board down, ESG, it matters to us. That net zero efforts and the net neutral initiative that we took on full force this year, the fact again that we can disclose that we're net neutral in 2021 was a huge step forward. And in the future, when you're marketing, it's going to be inevitable, but to discuss your sustainability scorecard, and those of us who are ahead of the pack, we're certainly going to get discounted rates. There's absolutely no doubt. It's happening now, Matt. So even if you got a lot of cash, you want to make sure any debt you get, any kind of financing you can get, you can do it at the best rate for your shareholders. So anyhow.
I hope your key man insurance is covering you for that.
Actually, it's dangerous. Well, Chris would know. The people in Perth are not big fans of the bikers. There's a lot of horns, and a French Canadian riding in a big red jumpsuit here it's kind of funny some days when I walk in the office. It makes for an interesting discussion. I'll just leave it at that. So.
Well, it is coming up towards Christmas, so I couldn't think of a better person to do it in the red jumpsuit. Right, Chris. I assume you kind of agree with a lot of what Paul has said there with regards to ESG and net zero carbon initiatives, but also the question I'm intrigued by is when a company is at the start of a turnaround process is a little bit more capital constrained than, say, you're where Paul was, 2 years ago, 18 months, 2 years ago, right? These are different times, and timing's everything. Can you pay as much attention to ESG concerns or conversations or narrative, or is it just, lip service because your key job is making money? You've got to make money for your shareholders and you've got to make money for the company, and that's what's important.
Well, I think there's two things to it that you can look at it. And sorry, you broke up a little bit there, the connection. So hopefully I answer your question correctly. I think the first vantage point is, do we have a choice? No, we don't have a choice. The second thing is, I think people underestimate how much value is locked up by having a properly well thought through ESG strategy and executing on it. There's no doubt in my mind that there will be benefits way and beyond what we're currently seeing from an ESG perspective. From a cost of capital perspective, from the conversations I had with some of our investors, being a much smaller organization, I think probably not as significant with the larger organizations, but we know what the TSX or what the regulator is doing in Canada and in putting together guidance as to what ESG should look like for smaller organizations. We've already, in our case, recognized that. We also recognize the potential cost benefits that might flow out of that. And we're definitely going to start walking down that route and preempt what will be required, and from our information sources, that'll probably be forthcoming towards the end of the year, when we'll know a little bit better as to how that's going to unfold for the small organizations. But I think at the end of the day, what's underlying to the whole ESG wave is building our license to operate, and it's not only a license to operate today, but a license to operate into the future. As we expand our resource and reserve base for the organisation. So there's no doubt that it is the way to go. I certainly think that it's the right thing to do. There's huge benefit not only for the organisation but also for the communities we operate in, and specifically in WA. Our exposure to the traditional landowners, in our case the Jiri Jiri and the Jindarana groups, is absolutely pivotal in allowing us to operate on the specific tenements that we have in our fold.
Okay, look, you're all TSX companies, well, TSXV in Superior's case, but North American corporate entities. You two are operating in Australia, Chris and Paul. Anil, how would you compare operating in Mongolia with regards to, I'm going to go more environmental than ESG, specifically on environmental, compared to Canada, where we've seen some stories coming out about the importance and need for companies to truly be concerned about their engagement with locals, with the community, with the environment, and following not just processes, but almost being ingrained into the company. Is it easier, comparable, harder to operate in Mongolia?
I would actually say easier.
Okay.
So now, the ESG part, we were proactive, even as a small company with no infrastructure, starting to build a mine back in 2017-18. We actually went to the local population within a 1,400 square kilometer radius and educated them on what we're doing, who we are, and how we actually will contribute to the province and the villages around us through employment, scholarship programs, a meat and dairy co-op. So we set up a scholarship program for their children right away, a meat and dairy co-op immediately where we source locally right for site for catering services. We've sponsored athletes. We've rehabilitated the marmot population, and we've already signed agreement with the government on the billion tree reforestation and plantation initiative. With just recently, last week actually, with the president, prime minister, our CEO did. So before it was even required, we were already proactively doing that and addressing that. So what that does is help you when you are breaking ground. People are actually aligned with you because they want to be part of those jobs, whether it's the non-skilled labor force, which we've hired about 60% from within the province. So people have moved closer to site to work with us. And we've actually converted in the last couple of years unskilled laborers or labor force into skilled laborers that are permanent. And we promote from within as well, where possible, through the education and training that we're providing. So saying all that, I guess if we did that in Northern Ontario, to build a mine in the manner that we did and come and actually and permit it, get the final permit in place, and actually start building the second, which we've already started constructing based on the DFS we put out, or the feasibility study we put out just a few weeks ago. It would probably take 10 years in Northern Ontario or maybe even BC, and from breaking ground in 2018 to first gold in 2020, I think we've shown. With a key permit that had to be completed while constructing, that it might be a little bit easier without cutting corners. Let's be very clear. From an environmental perspective, Steppe Gold was, I think, received 93% on the last environmental inspection, which was the highest out of any mine in Mongolia. So the government went out and inspected during COVID all the mines there. So I think we're performing well, both from a social and environmental aspect there.
Or do you feel that their standards, because it's a relatively new mining jurisdiction? I know there's some big players in there, and there have been some problems in the past. Yep. But do you think that their standards are international? Could they be harder on you?
Yep.
Could they be tougher on you? Yep. I just want to understand, this isn't just about the money.
No, absolutely. No, actually, I think they are up to international standards. So, for example, building, this is a risk we took on with our partners, Triple Flag, obviously, who funded us to build this first mine, was you don't get a final permit until the government inspects the operation. So you have to wet water commission. So you build it and you commission it on water, and the government comes in there and they can spend 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months inspecting every piece from, the office setup to all that. That's a big risk, but if you do things properly, you get it done. So we did. And so they appointed a working group of all levels of government. It took about 6 months from start to finish, once we could water commission, to receive that permitting to use the agents. So clearly they did a thorough job, I'd say. I think if we wet commission and the next day we received the permit to use chemicals without that thorough inspection, that's where you think people think that maybe some corners were cut. The government isn't as strict. They certainly are. I think they're doing a good job there. They've actually managed to shut mines down that haven't been operating properly from an environmental standard, and that's happening as we speak. So,
right.
I think they're doing a great job.
Okay, got a question sent in here, Paul. This is for you. I'm going to paraphrase it a lot. How well are you ingratiating yourself into? Because we're talking about different cultures here. You're American Canadian. some ambiguity there about your history. You're in Australia. How well are you ingratiating yourself with the locals? So we're going to test your new dialect and dialogue. So do you know what fair dinkum means?
Oh, geez. You know, I'm. If there's a way I can delete that question, I'd say delete that question. By the way, I'm Canadian.
Okay, you're born there.
Canadian, a bad hockey player. Remember, I was a bad hockey player, so I went into mine at 18. Married an American, so
right.
But yeah, unfortunately, Chris might have to help me out here. Chris,
what's it
might
mean?
help me out here. Chris, give me a hand here.
In fact, somebody hopefully taught me right 2 days ago. Fair dinkum is if you do something really well, or it's good, or it's recognized to be good. So
there you go. That's good. That's good.
You know,
okay. There's two more.
Well,
I'm not letting you off with this, Hewitt.
I'm a quick learner, so I'm writing it down here. So if I ever get asked that question again,
fair dinkum. Okay, two more. You ready?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. What is a slab of beer? Do you know that?
I got to be honest, I'm still drinking vodka while I'm here. A slab of beer would be a beer bottle or a beer can, I guess, or a beer bottle.
It's a crate of beer.
No.
Crate of beer.
Okay.
Yeah. We good? We're getting there.
Right.
And do you know what a cobber is?
No, but I know what a poutine is, and I know what a hockey rink is, and I know what a hockey stick is.
Okay. Any ideas, Chris?
Chris, help me out again here. These are some tougher questions.
I'm not even going to try and think what it is. But
oh my god, it just means a friend. So if you'd be my cobber, and I'd say, fair dinkum for your efforts this year. Well done to you, Chris. Likewise, I think it's been I know you've just got in. It's been nice little turnaround story. You're building up there. Like what you're doing. And then Neil, you're going from strength to strength, continuing to produce, and increase those answers. So there you go, all of you. I really appreciate all gold producers. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your time with us all today. Looking back at 2021, I'm going to let you each say what you're looking forward to in 2022. I'll start with my old cobber there. Paul, go for it. 2022. What are we looking for?
Yeah, so look, 2022 is going to be another exciting year for us, not unlike 2020, 2021. 2022 is a big year of growth for us. So as you know, we announced a plan this year when unfortunately a lot of people were having to reduce guidance. We were actually sticking our necks out and maintaining guidance, but actually putting out 3-year guidance to double our production between 100 to 200,000 ounces a year. So 2022 is setting that up. We're going to be driving a second decline. I talked about earlier the importance about productivity rates and getting that first decline at Beta Hunt from 37,000 tons to 80,000 tons. Beta Hunt is 80% of our ounces, Matt. So if we just repeat that success and not get too cute and too smart about ourselves, repeat the success we've already done, that on itself, taking Beta Hunt from 960,000 tons a year, let's call it 1 million to 2 million tons a year with that second decline, because that really is the bottleneck, and then increasing the mill, that gets us to that production rate. Beta Hunt's doing 22,000 ounces a quarter, so 80 to 85 to 9,000 ounces a year. You just double that on its own. You're sitting at about 160 to 180,000 ounces a year just with Beta Hunt here. And as you know, we've got a lot of upside and a lot of targets at Spargos, the Sleuth Trend. We're in Spargos now. So 2022 is about setting up that growth plan. That is, as a reminder, fully funded. We've got a growth plan in front of ourselves for our shareholders to grow from that 100,000 ounces a year to a range of 180 to 200,000 ounces a year by 2024. Fully funded. We're not relying on the market on this, which is a tremendous advantage here. So 22 is about seeing that new ramp getting started, getting it going, ordering a lot of parts for that mill, and another big year for us on exploration. A lot of our success here has been from the drill bit here. Let's face it. You know, we're in a district. We've got 2,000 square kilometers. 2,000 square kilometers here in a jurisdiction that hasn't had any drilling in almost 2 decades. The company that owned Higginsville before us was drilling $300,000 a year. We're talking in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 million. We're stepping our exploration and our res dev drilling up this year. We've got 8 drills on the ground right now between both of our operations. So that growth plan that we have in front of ourselves, again, I'm going to repeat that it's fully self-funded, doesn't include any upside from the drill bit. And look, we have had 3 new discoveries, not new targets here. We've had 3 new discoveries. We've had 2 new gold discoveries, the Larkin Zone. It was a new discovery last year. We've expanded it, the strike length, to over 1 kilometer now. We put out a new gold discovery last week or 2 weeks ago, south of the Gamma Island Fault. It was one of the top 10 of the week from grade times width. It was 4 meters of 40 gram. We don't have any information in this area. We've got our mine plans and everything and our reserves that we have in front of us. It doesn't exist in this area where we put out that intercept of 4 meters of 40 gram. That is directly below the 50C zone, the nickel area that we had discovered. So our drill bit has had 3 new discoveries, Matt, not 3 new targets. You can't help but get excited about that. And with the rate we're going to continue drilling, and we are adding a new, very senior VP of exploration here to our team here very soon to help us out because of all the drilling that we do have in front of us. So 2022 is about setting ourselves up for that growth and delivering and making sure, again, we don't fumble the ball on delivering. We've been very consistent about delivering. We've had 9 consecutive quarters against all obstacles, whether it was weather, whether it was COVID, whether it was shortage of people. No matter what, we've overcome all the challenges we've faced as a team. This team that we've assembled, they don't know how to fail. They're willing to make the sacrifices, stay the long weekends, stay the extra hours, and make sure that we deliver. We've got a reputation to hold, a reputation that we will. 2022 will be a very similar year in that case.
Brilliant.
Just on
starting to lose you, Paul.
The mill expansion.
We're starting to lose you, so I'm going to take the opportunity. We're starting to lose you, so I'm going to take the opportunity to jump in. That was very enthusiastic. I feel quite stressed. I feel I need to go and buy shares now. So great pitch, Chris. What about you? Looking forward to 2022.
I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. 3 main things we want to go after, and we want to progress on our 3 main goals. The first one is really building our reputation in the market by delivering consistently. So stability is key, and execution on what we say we're going to do to make sure that we deliver on that when we say we're going to deliver on it. The next step is towards, to take it to that next level of scale. We're currently operating. We started off in our turnaround strategy at about 60,000 ounces annualized on a quarterly basis. We're knocking on the door of 80,000 ounces, 5 quarters down the line. We're hoping to take that up to 100,000 ounces, over the near term as we unlock the potential, not only in our open pit fleet, but also upping throughput from our underground mine. And, there's no doubt, similar to Paul, we have to grow through the drill bit. We certainly are going to become a lot more explicit about our investment in our drill program and exploration program. We've had some really good hits up to now, but that, we need to build on that further as we expand, our footprint on our property. So without anything more, I think that's what we're hoping for in 2022.
You've done a great job since you come. Well, you picked up from where Tomorrow left off, and you're delivering. It's a good story. People go look at it. Likewise with Mr. Hewitt's company. Anil, you're also stepping up the ante here, and you've got a bit more capital to play with as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think we've shown how aggressive we are and how we continue to advance the company through the feasibility study, doubling our resources earlier this year, and then having a financing package for a majority of our capex for phase 2 within 2 weeks. It's pretty quick how we move. So 2022, we are set up, as Paul and Chris mentioned, to try to manage our expectations and hit them, or maybe exceed them. But we'll start with the current forecasting and hopefully exceed that. And we've, with our inventory buildup of over 45,000 ounces on a recovered basis sitting there, that's going to allow us to generate more cash flow than ever before, fund the growth of phase 2, which will allow us to double our production by the end of 2023. So the 50 to 60,000 ounces can go to over 100,000 ounces in a short period with very similar cost profile, looking at about $850 all-in costs. That could go down to about $750 with the power upgrade to grid. So that's a pretty significant amount of cash flow generation from now till in 2 years from now. So doubling our production profile has a meaningful advantage to us, not relying on the markets to raise capital. We're going to have a refinance of this debt package that we announced just recently next summer with the international syndicate, so a lower cost of capital, and then most importantly is get back to exploration. So with a limited budget while building this first mine, we haven't really explored our mining license and our other exploration license southwest of the country, where our neighbor has already had tremendous success and delineated 1 million ounces adjoining us, our licenses, and new discoveries they're making as well. We just didn't have the time or money to focus on that. So that's certainly something that's ready to go. And we can have a 20,000 meter budget across ATO mining license and the UK mining license that can double upon success. So we have that ability through our own cash flow. The oxide mine is going to generate over 50 million US of cash flow, net cash, over the next 12 to 18 months that we can use for phase 2 capex, as well as self-funded exploration across both properties. It's quite exciting year for us as well, and very happy to hear the updates from Chris and Paul as well.
Brilliant, gentlemen. I'm going to finish up there. Actually, while we were finishing, lots of questions were coming in. Perhaps the guys at Six can send those on to you. Some technical, some not so technical.
Very welcome.
So look, I do appreciate your time, and I just want you all to go off and look for a billabong on your property and let me know how that goes. Okay.
All right.